All over the Germantown Metro Park tonight, nets are going up. Welcome to the 2022 Ohio Bat Blitz. You're joining us at a remote bat monitoring station in Germantown Metro Park with exclusive access to a bat misnetting site. And we're here with Marla Perdicas, a park biologist. So, what is a Bat Blitz and why are we doing it here in Southwest Ohio?
This is the first year we've ever done the Ohio Bat Blitz. It was a joint effort among different conservation groups throughout the state, and also including Bat Conservation International.
Nice.
And we're doing the Bat Blitz to survey bats across their range in the state of Ohio. We're here at Germantown Metroparks, and we're doing it here in southwestern Ohio because it's an under-surveyed area in the state.
Okay.
Surveys are conducted to study bats around the country, and in particular in Ohio, we have a couple of bats that are federally listed species.
Oh, wow.
And so there are park districts like Summit Metroparks, where I work, where we survey for bats to better understand what bats we have in what parks. Bat surveys are conducted for various reasons.
Right.
But in general, southwestern Ohio is an under-surveyed area, so we decided to do our inaugural Ohio Bat Blitz down here.
Nice, lucky us.
Yeah.
Can you explain bat misnetting and how it works?
So this is a mist net. It's very difficult to see in the dark. It's made of nylon mesh, and the mesh has these tremel lines. There's 5 tremel lines in the net, and the net at the tremel line has a bag in it.
Oh, wow.
We use this mist net system near waterways, along trails, along right-of-way corridors. We set them up using a pole and pulley system. We can stack the nets on top of each other to create the width and the height that we need. When we use a mist net, we try to close the corridor off so that we're kind of tricking the bats to fly into the net and get essentially tangled inside the net. Biologists that's permitted to handle bats can come and untangle the bat out of the net. And once they do that, then we can collect some biological data. We do mist netting for a variety of reasons. We talked about the fact that we have some bats that are federally endangered species. And so it's important for us to know what bat species we have in our natural areas. Mist netting is a typical way to study bats in the summertime. Once we have those bats in hand, we can collect biological data. We take some measurements, determine their gender, what species of bat they are, but then we can also do some additional studies, so do some analyses on their guano.
And what will the guano be tested for?
Interestingly enough, when you do have some of these bats, we'll collect guano like this, kind of save it, and then later you can put it like in a petri dish, just put a little bit of water on it and peel apart slowly under a dissection scope and see the parts of the insect that's been eaten. So a lot of diet studies have looked at the pellets, to figure out to family usually what insects are they're eating.
Okay.
So,
but they can do genetics on them too. We can apply transponders to the bats and then track their movements using radio telemetry.
So all we do you notice a change in the pitch? It's change in the volume of it? So do you think it's over that way, or do you think it's over that way? That way. So in telemetry, how we go by finding these species is we find the strongest signal. So
the mist net is kind of the first step in studying the bat. Once we have the bat in hand, we can do some additional things.
Interesting. Oops, why are you in slow motion? Don't do that.
First thing,
They're so cute.
I didn't hear you.
I forgot my first thing hooks in there. But I'm fine.
While we're waiting, what is a bat?
A bat is a mammal. It's the only mammal we have that's capable of true flight, which is a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah.
I always wished I could fly, so I would love to be a bat. It's one of the reasons why I fell in love with them.
Oh.
They give birth to live young. They nurse their pups when they're born, and their pups drink milk. They're covered in fur. They're nighttime creatures.
There are bats that pollinate too, aren't there?
There are. So in warmer parts of our country and in other parts of the world, we have bats that are pollinators, so they drink nectar, and in turn, as they visit flowers, they pollinate plants. So if we enjoy things like bananas, and so bats are a pretty diverse group of animals throughout our world. But if you live in Ohio, all the bats here eat bugs. And so in spring, summer, and fall, we have our bats here, and they're active and flying at nighttime and eating insects. And then in the winter months, the bats either need to fly south for the winter and remain in a warm climate where there are bugs, or they need to sleep during the winter because their food resources are scarce.
And with them eating so many insects, they're pretty good pest control?
They can eat 25% or more of their body weight in bugs. We have some bat species that eat a lot of the pests that affect our crops. So
helpful.
Yes. So in particular, a very common bat that we have here in Ohio is called the big brown bat.
Oh, all right.
It is big, and it's one of the larger bats that we have in our state. And because they're a little bit bigger of a bat, they can eat larger prey items.
Oh.
And they eat a lot of the beetles, so they eat things that prey on our crops, like corn and soybeans. So
nice.
That's a really great reason to love bats.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, so you got a bat. Can you walk us through what you're doing?
Yeah, so we are going to take some biological measurements on our bat. And the first thing I always do is weigh the bat. I think we need the bigger scale because we're looking at big browns here, and they're the larger species that we have. So you guys can help me do math. We're at 32 grams. Just wait a second. That includes the bag bag. Thank you. Yes. At least she's being cooperative and giving us one sample. Inviting everything. So when we're looking at a bat, we want to know what species the bat is. We want to know if it's a male or female, what its current reproductive status is. So if the bat is an adult, is she post-lactating? So that's what we'd be looking for at this time of the year. In the spring or summer, we could tell whether she was nursing a pup. You can look here a little bit at the bat wing. Their wing is like a modified arm. So this back here is their elbow. This is their forearm. This knot up here is their hand or their wrist. This little structure right there is their thumb. And they have 4 fingers and a thumb just like we do. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when we look at the joints of this particular bat, we can see that they're long and flattened. And that demonstrates to me that this is a baby that was born earlier this spring.
So, how did you get interested in bats?
Well, I was working on my degree in ecology as a college student, and I was interested in doing work with wildlife. And so I found a local project. There was a local research project going on where they were studying bats in the Cottle Valley National Park, which is close to where I live.
Okay.
And I signed on as a volunteer and helped the first night and saw bats up close, and I was hooked.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Neat. Well, what advice have you got for people that want to work with bats now?
Most of the people that work with bats have some type of degree in biology or ecology, and they just need to find a mentor, somebody who's already doing some work with bats, and try to volunteer and get experience.
What kind of threats do they face?
Oh, bats face several threats. They actually have some predators, owls, snakes that can climb trees, raccoons that are at water sources where bats may be getting a drink. So they do have predators.
What about people letting their cats out? Is that a problem?
Cats can be a problem for bats as well, sure. They can even find bats that are mistakenly on the ground for some reason. You know, cats can also be at water sources where bats are trying to get a drink. Cats are good at climbing trees, which is where bats are typically hanging out during the day when they're not flying.
Right.
Bats also have some threats like degradation of habitat. As we take habitat away, the bats have less places to find food, raise their young, things like that. A more recent threat is white nose syndrome. White nose syndrome is a fungus that was brought here from Europe. It exists in cave habitats, and caves are where a large portion of our bats spend their winter. So in the wintertime, many bats try to hibernate for about 6 months out of the year. When they come in contact with the fungus that causes white nose syndrome, it gives them an infection. And during hibernation, bats have their immune systems slowed down, their metabolism slowed down so that they can exist for 6 months. They're trying to sleep out winter and the lack of food resources that winter creates. And so because the bats get sick from white nose syndrome, they wake up and try to increase their metabolism and their immune system, and they run out of their fat reserves. So now they have an infection, they get secondary infections, they don't have food or water to drink, and they become very ill and often will starve to death.
And is that something that's spreading around the country?
It is. It started in the northeastern part of the United States where it was introduced, and it's moving across the United States to the west.
Are scientists working on that?
They are. It's been around since about 2006. And so we've had a good amount of time for scientists to understand what it even was. They're also working on ways to understand, are these bats producing immunity to it? Originally, when it came into the United States, in caves where it was found, it was killing 98 to 100% of the bat populations that were hibernating in those caves. So it's a very serious disease. We're seeing that there are some bats that are immune to or resistant to the fungus. And so that's helping the bat populations. There are some bat species that are hibernating farther south than Ohio, and so their hibernation period is shorter. That's allowing the bats to get in and out of hibernation before they succumb to white nose syndrome. There are some things that are helping and working, but we're facing the fact that many of our bat populations have decreased 80, 90, almost 100%. And so it's going to take a very long time for our bat species to recover.
That are just at home, is there something they can do to help bats?
Sure. It's really important for people who like and appreciate bats to tell other people about them.
Oh, yeah.
I've been doing bat mist netting demonstrations for 20 years.
Oh,
and
geez.
every time we have the public come out and visit and see bats up close, it gets people excited about bats. It makes them understand why they're important.
What species this could be? I know you named some species here. This is chicken nugget bat. Yeah. Do you guys think this is a large bat or a small bat in general? This one? Is that the second largest bat that we're going to find in this area, pretty much? And it's called a big brown bat. Very the original name, right? But this one is a girl. It actually was a mama early this year, so you can tell that from just looking at that she had babies that nursed from her. And she's actually being a little bit chewy here, chewing on my finger, but she was being really nice before. We got some nice good pictures. But really what they're doing, it's not because they're being mean, but the only defense they really have is to kind of bite, to get something to let go. So right now, it has no idea that I'm not a predator trying to eat it. So the only thing you can do is try to chew and get away. So if I were to let her go, she wouldn't bite at all. You find that really that's the only reason that they're going to bite. Because I've been in caves where there's thousands of these things and they fly right past you, and sometimes they'll get on you, but then they'll just fly right back off. But yeah, they don't fly in your hair and try to attack you. But this particular one, you find these in and around houses and attics. They do really well around people and in human dwellings. So
If you learn about bats and tell other people about bats, they can care about bats too.
So if I turn it here, right, here's our eastern small-footed bat. So we get that bat with that 6 to 8 millimeter size foot there. And then here is our tri-colored bat. And here in this picture, you can really see those color bands, right, that don't show up.
There's other bat organizations that you can follow and even contribute to, like Bat Conservation International. There's bat houses that can be built and put up to try to encourage bats to come and live on your property. Just doing some important things at home, like planting native species in your yard. Native plants attract native insects.
Okay.
And as we've been talking, bats eat bugs, so the more bugs we can create in our yard, the better chance bats have.
So avoiding pesticides and chemicals.
Yes,
Okay.
and planting native plants. Also, it's important to leave dead parts of your trees if it's possible. Bats in the summertime, our females use either cracks or crevices in trees or bark that's exfoliating from trees.
Okay.
Oftentimes that's a dead limb or even a snag. If that dead limb or snag is not a threat to infrastructure on your property, if it can be left standing, that will attract bats to your property naturally.
Okay. Well, Marla, thanks for giving us a behind-the-scenes look at your research.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Great. And thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next year at the next Ohio Bat Blitz. Okay. So our people should cut.
I can't even remember the question she just told me she was going to ask, so we're pretty much in the same boat.
Okay.
10 o'clock isn't good for us.
Yeah. The coffee's wearing off.
Yes.
Yeah.